Central Alberta underwent some monumental changes after the turn of the 19th century, some of which literally changed the landscape. The first wheat crops in this area marked a huge turning point in how people lived off the land. Settlers arriving in the late 1800s brought wheat seeds with them, and by the early 1900s, wheat was growing strong in the black, rich soil around places like Red Deer and Lacombe. These prairie farms quickly became part of Alberta's identity. But wheat wasn't the only thing taking root. Potatoes were also introduced around the same time. These were hardy, easy to grow, and stored very well through long winters. Indigenous and Métis families soon began growing them alongside traditional foods, blending old and new in really practical ways. These crops didn't just feed people, they reshaped diets, trade, and daily life in a growing province. Wild rice has been a vital food source for Indigenous communities across the Great Lakes and Canadian Shield for centuries. In this recipe, wild rice is blended into your basic wheat pancake batter. The process begins with the dry ingredients, in this case wheat flour, a little baking powder, a little bit of salt, and if you like sugar, I usually use maple syrup. Then we're going to add the cooked wild rice. It adds a lot of depth and texture. Your regular wet ingredients are eggs, buttermilk, and melted butter. But if you've been paying attention, you'll know that I don't use eggs or milk or butter, in which case I've got some vegetable starches mixed with water to replace the eggs. They actually bind things really well. And oat milk with a little bit of vinegar to help it curdle and get that nice sour flavor. When we mix this, the grains of rice are really visible, and if I walked in on somebody stirring this bowl, I would think chocolate chip pancakes were happening, but it's not. This recipe is a version of a wild rice pancake recipe I've seen in a couple of Métis cookbooks. In China, rice has been cultivated for thousands of years. Grown in flooded terraces and lowland paddies, Asian rice is a domesticated grass. Its grains are uniform, soft when cooked, and central to culinary traditions across Asia, from steamed jasmine rice to sticky glutinous rice used in dumplings and desserts. But in North America, specifically Canada, another kind of rice grows. Wilder, darker, and actually different. Canada's wild rice isn't technically rice at all. It's from a group of aquatic grasses native to this continent. Its long, dark grains have a firm texture, earthy aroma, and nutty flavor. Unlike Asian rice, it grows naturally in shallow lakes and slow-moving streams, thriving in the boreal zones of Ontario, Manitoba, and northwestern Quebec. For generations, Indigenous peoples have harvested manumin by canoe, gently knocking the ripe grains into the boat using wooden sticks. Wild rice first spread westward from the Great Lakes region through Indigenous trade routes and later via European interest in fur trade provisioning. As settlers and traders moved into present-day Manitoba and Saskatchewan, and eventually Alberta, so too did the appreciation for this resilient grain. By the late 19th century, wild rice had made its way into parts of Alberta, both through natural reseeding and limited cultivation efforts. Today, wild rice remains a distinctly Canadian crop, still hand-harvested in some regions, and increasingly appreciated for its nutritional value and cultural significance. You probably know how to make a pancake. And this is no different. There's just the pre-cooked wild rice inside. It's actually a really good option for like a savory pancake if you keep out the sugar. Just get some oil in your pan. I use a stainless steel. Get the heat even before you put in the room temperature batter. Get it thin, and then wait for the bubbles.
When I started research for this particular mini-series, I wanted to connect with different types of communities in the Red Deer area. Obviously, Indigenous communities, because I know that a lot of times our history isn't displayed together. We don't necessarily have shared cemeteries or shared museums or shared history books even, and especially shared history documentaries. So it was really important to me to try to draw in other kinds of documented oral histories. So I went and visited the Red Deer Native Friendship Society to see what a couple of the ladies there thought I might overlook in my book reading and online research. And one of the topics they suggested I look into was the Battle of Pine Lake. So I did. And the thing is, we don't have documented archaeology from that area, just like we don't have any documented archaeology around our local residential school or burial grounds and a lot of places. So this is something that's based on the story that was passed down from about the year 1820. It was the day after a hunting party of Cree were making their way back home. They made camp for the night, they took their meat, they took their skins, and they settled in. And before they made their journey the next day, one of the members of the party was talking about a vision he'd had, or a nightmare, about how this winter upcoming was going to be really hard. And he wanted them to hurry and get us home as quickly as possible to avoid bad weather or just bad luck. And when they went to sleep that night, a nearby warrior party of Blackfoot was creeping in slowly. And by morning, there was nothing left of the hunting party. There were no people, no horses, no meat, no tools, no hunting equipment, nothing. It was this silent battle, a silent surprise battle between the Blackfoot and the Cree, who had, as we've talked about, been allies or touch and go anyway for hundreds of years before European goods like guns and metal tools gave the Cree an edge over the Blackfoot that hadn't had before. So there were tensions at this point, and this hunting party took the brunt of that anger. So legend has it that the elder of that hunting party, his spirit, was actually entombed in an old gnarled spruce tree to stay as kind of a beacon to the rest of their families and tribe, and sort of as a reminder of what happened. And that's why that tree is called the ghost pine, and this is the ghost pine story. Pine Lake isn't actually surrounded by pine trees, but spruce trees. When you don't know the difference, they're really easy to mix up, and that's probably what happened with the settler people that came in. You just called it Pine Lake. But technically, it would be the old ghost spruce from the Battle of Spruce Lake.
In the autumn of 1847, a wave of influenza swept across the western interior of Canada, striking deep into the Saskatchewan Valley and extending into what is now Alberta. This outbreak, one of several in the mid-19th century, was particularly severe in the Central Prairie and Parkland regions. The disease originated near Norway House and moved westward through the Hudson's Bay Company's vast transportation network. Boat brigades and overland trade routes became arteries for contagion. Forts like Pelly, Edmonton House, and regional hubs in the Saskatchewan and Swan River districts were hit hard. For the Indigenous communities, Cree, Assiniboine, Blackfoot, and others, the consequences were profound. Lacking immunity to European diseases, they suffered deeply. The 1847 outbreak killed dozens, but it was part of a string of epidemics that cumulatively caused hundreds of Indigenous deaths across the 1830 to 1850 period. In one especially deadly episode in 1835, at least 40 to 50 Indigenous people perished in the English River District alone, with mortality often highest among women and children. The outbreak paralyzed fur trading operations. At Fort Edmonton, Chief Trader John Harriet reported that entire communities in the Parkland area were debilitated. Labor shortages slowed the transport of goods, and the illness decimated productivity. Not only were fur returns expected to drop, but the epidemic also strained already fragile social networks between Indigenous communities and trading posts. Despite the hardship, these outbreaks also revealed the resilience of Indigenous groups, who adapted through seasonal migration, dispersal from trading centers, and traditional healing practices. Yet the flu of 1847 underscored how interconnectedness via trade, migration, and colonial expansion could also be deadly. In the end, this influenza wave, though one among many, carved lasting scars among the cultural and economic landscape of Western Canada, and it was a grim reminder that disease, as much as commerce or conflict, helped shape the early history of the Canadian frontier. Reports to Governor Simpson during and after the 1847 outbreak voiced concern not only over lost revenues, but also over the declining Indigenous populations who served as laborers, guides, and trade partners. In some districts, populations were so diminished that entire bands vanished from the record for years. Others were forced to consolidate or migrate, shifting the geopolitical balance between nations like the Cree, Blackfoot, and Métis. The flu, seemingly a transient affliction, had left permanent marks on the landscape, changing routes, relationships, and even language patterns.